I'm talking today with Ron Judkoff and David Reich. David joins us from the Quincy Climate Action Network, and Ron joins us as a pioneer in the field of efficient design. He's recently retired as a chief architectural engineer at the National Renewable Energy Laboratories in Golden, Colorado. We are talking about a program that Ron will be presenting on Tuesday, September 15th at 7 o'clock. The title of that program is How to Save the World from Climate Change. Ron, why don't you tell us yourself, how are you affiliated? What kind of credentials are we putting behind your name today?
So I recently retired from the National Renewable Energy Laboratory and NREL, commonly called. Many years ago, it started out being SERI, Solar Energy Research Institute, which the older generation among you might have heard of. And I have been with them since 1978.
Which I understand is after you and David first met. David was very excited and pleased to reconnect. David, why don't you tell a little bit about, we don't have to put a date on that, but I thought there was a great story there. I'd love you to share how you and Ron made this connection originally.
Well, Ron lived down the hall from me in college. He arrived one year fresh from a year at the Sorbonne, and we were both French students. And he ended up changing his focus ultimately, and I guess I did too. And we've known each other for, put it this way, well more than half our lives. And I have seen Ron several times since then. Once when he was about to leave for the Peace Corps in Africa, which was, I gather, a life-changing experience for him. And then later on when he had, I think, recently started working at NREL, or its predecessor out in Colorado.
Were you doing activism at the time? Did you know each other through, or is it just, you guys were just living on the same hall?
No, we were in a French language only dorm, so it was actually a little house, and everybody knew each other quite well. And I think in those days everybody was pretty much doing activism. If you were breathing air, that was in the air.
Okay. And so your initial conversations, I assume, there were all in French. That's cool. Just
theoretically.
Yeah, okay. Ron, do you remember it the same way? So David was just saying.
Yeah. So we lived in a house at Tufts University, and it was called the French House. And one of the benefits was that was wine and cheese occasionally.
Nice. You were smart men then. That's great. And so your path took you from the Peace Corps, and were you doing engineering work for the Peace Corps and helping people do?
I was. That's what really got me set on the path that I ended up on. So I was doing rural infrastructure construction works. They weren't necessarily energy works, but we were digging water wells. I sunk about 42 water wells while I was working in West Africa. We also built a few baby birthing clinics out of reinforced concrete so that they could actually be sanitized. Because mud brick is very difficult to sanitize.
I can imagine. Yeah,
it tends to melt away when you try to when you try to.
High pressure wash is not a good idea on those.
Not a good thing for that. So in sanitary facilities also was part of the project. So I was doing basic construction, and that sort of oriented me toward architectural engineering, which I then emphasized in grad school after returning from the Peace Corps.
And so then you went to grad school, and then you worked for the Energy Labs, which you recently retired from. That's
so
abbreviating a large amount of time, I know. Yeah.
One of the things I noticed when I was working over there was that the indigenous architecture, in the absence of electricity, which even if you were in the capital city of those countries, the electricity would go down all the time. And so European style buildings, like if you were staying in a hotel, European style building, as soon as the electricity went out, they became uninhabitable. Whereas the indigenous architecture remained maybe not quite up to our standards of comfort, but they remained habitable with no power input whatsoever. And so I got curious as to why that was and what was the features and nature of the materials that were being used, and why did indigenous architecture work, and that got me pointed in the direction of architectural engineering.
So help me understand, the program that we're doing is all about how all of us, what kind of individual steps we can do to fight climate change. And I think the lens that I assume you're going to bring to it is the individual choices we make as consumers, as people that are shaping our own immediate environment. But is it more than that?
Actually, that's not quite what I'm going to be talking about. I'm going to be talking about the technological developments that have occurred at the National Renewable Energy Laboratory that allow us to transform our energy system to a non-fossil based energy system without at scale. So, rather than, it's great if people, want to put photovoltaic panels on their roofs, and that there are places where that's very cost effective and economical now. It's a good deal. And so I totally encourage people to do that on an individual basis, but it's even more cost effective to go the solar garden route, where you get the economies of scale. And you also get the advantages that you don't have long utility runs. So if you have local let's say for an entire town, you have a solar installation for that town that's nearby. It doesn't have to have a long utility run, but it still benefits from the cost effectiveness of scale.
And we can start stepping away from some of those really dangerous pipelines that are using, trying to take oil across these massive distances.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and also at utility scale. So if, when renewable, and we're so close to being there, we are there in some places where renewable is the least cost for the utilities. And I'll show some examples of that that we've had out here in Colorado, just in the bid process for how Xcel Energy, one of the largest utilities in the country, how Xcel Energy, every couple of years they put out for bid so that they make sure they have energy available to them. And the lowest bids came in from renewables this time.
Well, that's really encouraging.
Yeah. So it's just economics, and many of the large investment firms are now moving away from fossil fuel-based investments and are actually pledging really large renewable and sustainable energy investments. And they're not doing that because they're nice guys. There may be some.
Maybe, but that's not what motivates them.
But that's not why they're doing it. They're doing it because they're realizing that the most cost-effective bet for the future is sustainable energy, non-fossil energy system.
And it's coming full circle. I'm sure that the reason they were living in the housing, there had to be a pull in Africa when you were in West Africa for indigenous housing, not just because it was the local piece, but because it was actually more comfortable when they didn't have the power. They weren't just trying to be true to the roots, although I'm sure that was an important element. It was more comfortable, which is kind of
well. Actually, there's some interesting examples. There's an author called Hassan Fathi who's written about indigenous architecture in the Mideast, and there was an example where the government actually came in and created a whole new town for people that were living in indigenous architecture. They actually lived in underground.
Wow.
Their indigenous architecture was underground based building. And at first they were all excited about it. You know, they're saying, oh, we're going to be really modern and live in these. They went into them and they were so uncomfortable that they all moved back to their original indigenous houses.
Well, this sounds really fascinating, and it sounds like it's going to be helping us give tools so that we can push for public policy that's going to be more efficient with our resources. It's going to be more comfortable. We haven't talked about jobs, but everything that I've seen recently, there's a lot of labor that's going to be needed to do some of this.
Well, the interesting thing is you can't outsource, building these distributed solar, wind, also energy efficiency in our building stock. Those are all things that are highly distributed. You can't outsource them. They take a lot of labor. And it's not just, it's not just mindless labor. It's labor that has to know what they're doing. So it's a good, it's a set of good jobs that have to do with doing all this stuff.
Well, that is super encouraging in all sorts of ways. I really look forward to the full presentation. So thank you for agreeing to join us. David, is there anything that you'd like to add here at the end?
Well, I just want to add that Ron is a natural for our organization. We're all about climate solutions, and that includes more than anything else efficiency and renewable energy, and that's what Ron has done his whole career, and it's what he's going to be talking about. So I'm really thrilled to be able to co-host the event, and I'm looking forward to it.
Great. Well, thank you, David. I'm really looking forward to co-hosting the event with you. I'm really grateful that you helped make this connection with Ron. And Ron, thank you so much for making time to share your deep, wealth of knowledge with us. I'm really looking forward to hearing more. Sounds really
it's my pleasure to do it, and it's also, I think, in a sense, also a responsibility to do it. I had the good fortune to be able to do that kind of research for a long time, and I certainly want to share the results of that research with people who need it and want to act upon it.
Well, I'm glad to be part of that process. Thank you, Ron, for giving us the opportunity. It's great. So I've just been talking with Ron Judkoff and David Reich. Ron, from a recently retired member of the National Renewable Energies Laboratory, and David with Quincy Climate Action Network. We were talking about the program Ron will be presenting on Tuesday, September 15th, starting at 7 o'clock on Zoom, YouTube, and Facebook. And the topic of that program is how to save the world from climate change. I hope you enjoyed our conversation, and I hope you'll join us on the 15th.